Is it working now?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Sherry. Okay, so thank you for worship leaders. Thank you for this awesome time of worship. I know they're singing and then they want you to sing and they kind of like step away and we just want them to sing, you know. So just don't sing either. We listen to your beautiful angelic voices. And if you were listening to the songs and singing the songs, you're kind of like maybe getting the idea of where we're going today. Jesus overcoming and us overcoming. So I kind of want to ask you, how was your week? And I know some of you already gave me that answer a little bit earlier, like, wow, it was something else, right? It was a week of trials, a week of problems, a week of tears maybe. And I just want to say, I'm there with you. It's been a really, really hard week. Emotionally, spiritually, even physically. And someone said from our own church, they're like, Alex, I think Satan is attacking our church. I think he's attacking everyone this week. So if you kind of fall into this category where it's just, yes, I've been struggling, man, things have been hard. I don't understand why things are happening to me. Well, this sermon is for you. And if you had peace this week, this sermon is also for you because you're going to face those trials. We're going through book of Hebrews, and we're actually going in quite a fast pace. And like I said, unfortunately, it is a fast pace. There's so much to learn from this. But, you know, we're going to be reading Hebrews chapter 12 today. And discouraging times are very discouraging, aren't they? I think there's a reason why they're discouraging, because they're discouraging. And so those are the times we never welcome into our lives. I don't think that there is a single person in here that says, like, I would love for some discouraging time right now. This sounds great. I'm really craving for some discouragement right now. Man, just too much encouragement going around, right? So I don't think anyone says that. Wow, I'm about to struggle a lot. How awesome. Usually we try to live and make choices in a way that bypass these discouraging times. But what do you do when discouraging times happen? What do you do? Like, where do you go? How do you feel? Right? And so this is not the passage I'm preaching on, but I'm just going to throw a passage out. It's James 1:2. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." Well, that's not the way the world kind of just works, right? When you're about to be in a lot of trouble, consider it an opportunity to have a lot of joy. Wow, I don't know how that works, right? But the Word of God says that, so consider it, you know, for an opportunity for great joy. It's that simple, right? You are about to lose your job. What an opportunity to be happy. Wow. You're about to be persecuted. Your house and car and your belongings are about to be confiscated. Get ready to be joyful because you're going to be homeless. I'm joking, of course. The reality is it's hard to be happy when trials come our way. It's really hard. Why should I be joyful when I'm suffering? Why should I be joyful when my soul is suffering? And so James 1:3 now, it continues the thought. He says, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow." So this is why I have to rejoice, or I have an opportunity for joy when trials come, because my faith or my endurance has a chance to grow. It has a chance to grow. So trials can cause your spiritual endurance to grow. And endurance helps me overcome and outlast temptations and trials. It makes me victorious. I don't know if you've been an athlete or are an athlete. I used to wrestle before, and I could have all the skills in the world, but when I'm wrestling against a skillful wrestler, it's my endurance that's going to give me a victory. Not just my skills, my endurance. I have to endure. So, I should consider joy when trials come, because they will develop my endurance, and at the same time, I must get ready to endure as I see the trials that are heading my way. I must get ready. So what kind of mindset should I have as I experience the discouraging times? And as we read Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 13, the author of Hebrews helps us with this question, and he gives us some reasons to endure the discouraging time. In fact, I name my sermon Reasons to Endure Discouraging Times. So before we dive into the points why we endure discouraging times, let's read our passage first. So it's Hebrews chapter 12. We're going to read verses 1 through 7 first, and then just verses 12 and 13. Okay? So therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith because of the joy awaiting him. He endures the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not given your lives in your struggle against sin. And have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? He said, "My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child." As you endure the divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by his father? I think we have more over there. There we go. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. What a passage. What a passage. Again, I could just sit here and just look at verse 1 and 2, and I could spend 2 hours talking to you about it. There's just so much to talk about. But what is this about anyway? And if you read the whole chapter, and if you're noticing the theme here, it's enduring. It's about enduring, and it's the reasons for enduring, and it's the reasons why we are going through certain sufferings. So a lot of times this is the way we paint our lives. We go through sufferings because of our choices. A lot of times we go through suffering because of someone else's choices. And a lot of times we go through suffering because, suffering just happens. And we don't know what to do. Sometimes we blame people. Sometimes we stay angry. Sometimes we just run around like a chicken with the head cut off, right? We have no idea what to do. And sometimes we try to pray and we try to worship, but most of the time we're just trying to get away from this specific thing that is hurting me right now. What do I do? This is our reality. This is our culture. This is what we do. This is what we kind of like lean towards. We are not necessarily going towards the root of the problem. We just want that pill. We just want that pain to go away. And often when trials happen, we just try to run from them. We just want them to be gone. We want that feeling to be gone. But the author of Hebrews is kind of like pointing our attention, and he's listen, let's endure discouraging times. Why? Well, he gives us a first point here. Because all faithful had to endure discouraging times. And the reason why we're saying that is because before chapter 12 of Hebrews, there's chapter 11, right? We call it the Hall of Fame, the heroes of faith. We love, I'd say you do, I love reading through this chapter because I love reading through these heroes of faith. And I know their stories because I read the Bible, right? I know the story of Abraham. I know the story of Isaac. I know the story of Jacob. And, I know the story of Samson. I know the story of Joseph. And there's just so much to talk about. I know those stories. I read those stories and I read their trials and I read how they overcame them. And so when I read Hebrews 11, it's just such a good chapter reminding me that it is possible to overcome and that it is possible to live a life of faith. And I think this is why the author of Hebrews actually put this chapter in there, put this section in there, just to remind the believers that were struggling, not just financially and socially because persecution was dawning or starting. They were struggling with their own sin. They were struggling with their own problems. And so I think there's a reason why he put there, just to put that chapter in there, just to show them, every believer struggles. And every man and woman of faith struggled. They all walked through life and they all had to walk in faith. And it was really, really hard. But they did it. And so verse 1 in chapter 12, he says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. And I'm going to stop right there. To the life of faith. He says we are surrounded by a huge crowd. There's different translations say we are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. It means a lot of witnesses. There was a lot of them. And since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses, what witnesses? Witnesses to the life of faith. The author of Hebrews says that there's a huge crowd of witnesses that can witness that life of faith is possible even when it's hard. And sometimes we feel like giving up. Have you ever felt that before? Where you're like, I'm done. What's the point of trying, God? What's the point of trying to just work with my children? They're not listening. What's the point of trying this marriage thing? It's just like, it's not working. What's the point of fighting against this sin when it comes back over and over and over and over and I can't seem to overcome? What's the point of doing all of this? And I'm pretty sure that all of you asked this question and all of you stated that. I don't think I can do this anymore. Why am I tempted so often? Why do I keep messing up? Why does it seem like God has abandoned me to fight sin and uncertainties of life and the world all by myself? The author of Hebrews is reminding us that Hebrews 11 was written to remind us that life of faith is possible, not giving up, and moving forward. Well, that's achievable. You can. Listen, I know. As a believer, I think at the end of the sermon you will be very encouraged, but I know as a believer sometimes you feel like you're barely moving. You're just like one day at a time, right? I hope I don't fall right now. Right, you just like this seems like it's our life right now. It just like we picture ourselves as very wounded, bleeding, just all clothes shredded, and we're just like trying to just hold on to another day. I don't know if you feel this way, but I do. And sometimes we're like, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. So not giving up and moving forward is achievable. He says we are surrounded by a huge crowd or a cloud of witnesses. And if you look at Hebrews 11, and then there's like, it's like he only mentions like 18 people, all right? It's not a huge crowd or it's not a huge cloud. It's just 18 people. But the reason why he uses that word, because, well, he says like, well, there's more than that. This is just an example. There's more than that because he uses men and women, and there's a lot of believers that went through a lot of trials and they overcame. So the ancient Greek word translates cloud as a figure of speech, indicating that there's a large group and it's so great, a cloud of witnesses. That cloud possibly includes great men and women of God who have come since those Hebrews 11 saints, known and unknown to history. And let me read something to you from Hebrews 11. This is what these heroes of faith have done. This is what their life was described like by the author of Hebrews. In chapter 11, verses 33 through 40, he says, by faith these people overthrew kingdoms. Oh, man, I like the first one. Who overthrew kingdoms? Man, by faith these people overthrew kingdoms. Wow, that sounds awesome. Ruled with justice and received what God has promised them. All right, they shut the mouth of lions. They quenched the flames of fire, and they escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death. This is the first part of this section where he says some of these people, by faith, they received what they needed. Oh man, they were great warriors and they were great kings, and they saw dead rise from the people rise from the dead and stuff like that. And we're thinking like, wow, this is faith and this is the faith I want. And then he describes the other faithful who are also in this category, but they experienced something else. He says, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained and imprisoned, and some died by stoning, and some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. So some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in the caves and holes in the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised them. For God had something better in mind for us, so they would not teach or reach perfection without us. So, and again, we're looking at these heroes of faith. Some conquered kingdoms, overthrew kingdoms. Some like killed lions with their bare hands. I'm like, man, I'd like to have that faith, right? And so, like, we want that. But then some died. Some were killed. Some were tortured. Some were homeless. Some just seems like they lived a life where it's just the life that I don't want to live, but they lived the life of faith. So, but in any way, the author of Hebrews says the life of faith, whether it is a successful in the way it seems like a successful life of faith, or a hard life of faith, we all go through that, and it's possible to achieve by looking at the heroes of faith. So if we know that there are people, there are saints that are going through problems and they're achieving the life of faith, they're overcoming the world, what should my or our response be? Our response should be, that's the other half of verse 1. It says, so let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that is so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. So let us strip off every weight that slows us down. Let me ask you a question. As you are running this race, following Christ, what slows you down? What slows you down? What makes you slow? What makes you not run? He says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down. Is it habits? Is it hobbies? Is it free time? Is it entertainment? Is it toxic environment? Notice that he's not even talking about sin yet. Everything that slows you down. Not necessarily a sinful thing. There are things that slow us down. So God, help us understand what are some things that slow us down in running this race. God, help me understand what are the things that slow me down in getting to know you. God, help me understand what are some things that slow me down in understanding you. God, help me. And we all need to pray this prayer because he says if you have that, you probably do. Strip it off. Get rid of it. There are things that slow us down and they're not even sin at all. It can be my job in some cases. It can be my business, or it can be the way I run my business, or the way I treat my job. It could be many things. What is slowing you down in the life of faith? And second, the author of Hebrews mentions sin. Sin will definitely slow you down. Sin will trip you up. He says, especially the sin that so easily trips you up. Oh man, okay, let's think about that one. What is that sin in your life that so easily trips you up? I'm going to explain this a little bit, and this is how sin slows us down a lot. All right, it's just one example. There are many. Anytime I'm as a believer, when I fall flat on my face and I sin very often, after that, I don't want to pray. I don't want to pray. I don't want to talk to God. I want to be in this pity right now because I feel so sorry about what I've done, and I feel that I've offended God in such a big way that He's not going to listen to me, so I must wait 2 or 3 days until things cool down between us. And often when I'm in sin, I can't pray. When I live a life of sin, I can't fellowship. When I live a life of sin, I can't read. And so on and on and on. Sin will trip us up. Notice that he says sin that strip off a sin that so easily trips us up. There are sins that trip us up easily. We are advised to rid of them. This is a tough one because it seems that we cannot let go of some sins. You know, I think you all have some sins that you just can't seem to let go of. They seem impossible to get rid of. Well, you need endurance. The sin is clinging on to you. And you're fighting and you're giving up and you're like, No, you need endurance to continue to fight until you overcome. And it's going to take some time, but you need endurance. So the author says, let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. Easier said than done, right? Oh, let's just run. And that's true. It is easier said than done. How can I put away things that slow me down in the life of faith? How can I rid of sin that trips me up? How can I endure all trials? How can I do all those things? It's too hard. Sometimes it seems like it's actually impossible to do. Why should I continue? Why? Well, how can I do that? Am I even able to do that? And let me move to my second point. You are able to do all those things. All right? This is where encouragement begins. Because Jesus endured the cross for us. You are able, let me tell you this, and something that you should know. You are able to overcome trials because Jesus endured the cross for you. You're able. I know it seems hard. I know it seems impossible. But you're able. You're able to do that because Jesus endured the cross for you. Jesus endured the cross so you would be able to endure the trials. Do you understand that? I mean, when we're thinking about this specific term, Jesus endured the cross for me, that means like I should be on that cross. Yes, that's correct. You should be on that cross and you're the one who should be punished, and Jesus took your place. Absolutely right. So He took your place. Right? And He died for your sins. Absolutely right. But also, Jesus endured that cross so you would be able to endure life. Romans chapter 8, verse 11, it says, the Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. If Jesus would not have endured the cross, then the Spirit of God would not have had any reason to raise Jesus from the dead. And if that Spirit of God who did not raise Jesus from the dead, He would not live in you. But this is contrary to what I've just said. Jesus endured the cross and He died, and the Spirit of God that raised Him from the dead now lives in you. And that should be very encouraging, because the Spirit that overcame death, the Spirit that overcame everything natural, lives in you and gives you the ability to overcome things that seem impossible. Can you hear me? So I know you want to give up. But you have a spirit living in you that can empower you to overcome, because He raised Jesus from the dead. And if He raised Jesus from the dead, dude, you can overcome and do that. You can overcome. Yes, He lives in you and He empowers you, and the cross was essential for your salvation and for your empowerment to walk in obedience to God. Cross was essential for my empowerment to walk in obedience to God. So I should keep that in mind as I go through trials, and I should remind myself that, oh, Jesus endured the cross for me, not just that He took my place. No. So the Spirit that raised Him from the dead, that Spirit would live in me. And I have no excuse. Now I can. I know it's hard, and I know you will fail. I understand. It's hard to learn how the Spirit speaks, and it's hard to learn how He leads, but it's not impossible. That Spirit gives you strength. Our salvation, the cross was essential for our salvation and for our empowerment to walk in obedience to God. And then verse 2 of Hebrews 12, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. So how do we endure this? How do we go through trials? By keeping our eyes on Jesus, who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting Him, He endured the cross, disregarding His shame. Now He is seated in the place of honor besides God's throne. This is another thing I want to just address. Not only did Jesus endure the cross, so His Spirit would live in you, so you would overcome life and trials. Jesus also endured the cross, so He could sit at the right hand of the Father. What does that mean? Well, it seems like this correlates with Romans chapter 8, and Yuri would kind of say, see, told you Paul wrote this. Right? It correlates with Romans chapter 8, which talks about Jesus sitting at the right hand of God, doing what? Pleading on our behalf. Oh, wow, this is so beautiful. He pleads on my behalf as He sits at the right hand of God. So why should I try? Why should I endure? Why should I just continue on fighting with my sin and with this world? Why should I continue to wrestle? Why? Because Jesus, first of all, He gave you the power to do it. And in case you mess up, in case you fall, in case you sin, He's sitting next to the Father. And He says, He's mine. I got Him. I got Him. He's ours. And the wrath of God no longer is against me. So Jesus is sitting next to God's throne, pleading on my behalf as I struggle, as I fall, and as I get up. We have a reason to endure difficult times because Christ had endured the cross, thus given you the power to endure everything else. We have a reason to endure difficult times because it says that Jesus is sitting in the place of honor besides God's throne. I have the reason to run the race, endure my trials, because if I mess up, my Redeemer is pleading on my behalf. This should be encouraging. It is a win-win for us. Jesus endured the cross so I would be empowered to overcome, and so He could sit next to God and whisper on our names into the Father's ears. They're mine. That's why He endured the cross. So you could have the Spirit live in you and help you to overcome. But in case you fall, He sits there next to the Father and He pleads on your behalf. That's why He endured the cross. So that's encouraging, knowing that if I try and I fall and I fail, He's still got me. And if I try and I have no power and I ask Jesus for power, He gives me power. It's a win-win. Try. Keep fighting. Do not give up. So what should our response be? And that's verse 3 here in Hebrews 12, verse 3. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people, then you won't be weary and give up. And basically what he's saying is that as you are going through trials, and as you understand that Jesus died for you, and now the Spirit of God lives in you, and you are empowered to overcome, and in case you mess up, Jesus is still pleading on your behalf. You're in a very good position. And if you're still having a hard time, think of what Jesus had done. Think of what he went through. He says, and then you won't become weary and give up. He says, set your eyes on Jesus. Set your life on the life of Christ. Set your eyes on what he has done. And then, well, it probably will be easier for you to continue in your struggle against whatever it is you're struggling. He says, after all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. And that simply means that he's like, you're not dead yet. So that also means that as long as you live, you will struggle against sin. So your victory or your battles against sin, they're not done. As long as you live and breathe, they're going to be there. Sin is going to be attacking you. You're not dead yet. So he says, as long as you live, keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on what he has endured. Keep your eyes on him sitting next to the Father, pleading on your behalf. So our response should be to look at the cross and understand why Jesus had to endure the cross. Our response should be to strive to endure like Christ, because now we can endure like Christ. We can, because that same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives in us. Our response should be to strive to endure like Christ because we can. Our response should be an understanding that as long as we live, there will be struggle against sin. There will be struggles in general. And the author of Hebrews is inviting to respond to Christ's endurance on the cross by enduring trials with sin and life for as long as we live. Why? Which leads us to our final point. You know why? Because discouraging times are not out of God's control. That's why. Discouraging times, they're not out of God's control. Yes, absolutely, everything that happened in your life was not outside of God's control. Don't think that it was outside of his control. It was not outside of his control. And this is actually very encouraging. So there are times when I feel alone and when I feel like I'm struggling, fighting this world all by myself, thinking, God, where are you? Well, I must understand that this is happening to me, not outside of his control. That means he's allowing it to happen. This is very important to understand, that God is in control. Verse 5. He says, and have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? He said, my child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves and he punishes each one he accepts as a child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Whoever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father? The author of Hebrews indicates that often God allows trials due to discipline. And we are using this word discipline. In fact, the original word is not punishment, it is discipline. And there's a difference between punishment and discipline. And I know we just read in this verse, he disciplines and he punishes. But the original word is discipline. It's discipline. The law punishes you. All right? You get a ticket, they don't care if you change or not. They just give you a ticket and you give them your money and that's it, right? You get a sentence, well, you just get punished. That's it, right? But a parent disciplines his child. Why? So the child could become a better human. That's why. Discipline is to make you better. Discipline is an interesting word that we tend to misunderstand. We often think that it is punishment. The law punishes you. It doesn't care if you get better or not. Punishment comes out of justice. You get what you deserve. Discipline is different. We are trained discipline in military. For those of you who are military, we are trained discipline in sports, whoever is in sports, in business, and so on. Discipline makes people better. Children are disciplined. Why? So they grow up to be better human beings. To discipline your child is to improve your child. To discipline yourself is to improve yourself. To discipline your skills is to improve your skills. Discipline improves. So what's the purpose behind God's discipline? It's the same. It is to improve you. It is to train you. It is to sanctify you. It is to make you better. So when God shows interest in us, He makes us better. He makes us better because He loves us. Because He loves us. I thought it was funny. My friend was a teacher who says like, well, when I really see some perspective in the child, I'm hard on them and in school and I pick on them and they're like, why do you hate me? He's like, no, because I want you to be better. And he's like, and those that I don't see any perspective in them, he's like, I don't do anything with them. I just ignore them. There's no, and it's kind of funny, but it's true. I love you, that's why I'm gonna discipline you. I love you, that's why I'm gonna train you. I love you, that's why I'm going to make you better. This is encouraging in times when we are struggling and scream out, God, where are you? We must understand that He is there at that moment working on you. So when it seems He's not there, He's actually there. When it seems like you're alone and you're just struggling, you don't know what to do, He's actually there. He is working on you. He is making you better. And I know we hate discipline, and I know we hate trials. I feel like that was my week. And sometimes I'm like, God, like, why? Why do I need this right now? So you could be a better pastor. Had a not so pleasant conversation with my kids. God, why do we go through this every time? I know I want to blame my kids. But no, it's so I could be a better father. And children maybe they're like, well, why are my parents like that? It's so you could be a better child, better daughter, better son. You see, we can blame one another, but God allows all these things so you could be better. So what should our response be? And verse 12 says, now you know all these things. Now you know. You're tired, I know. I know you're tired. I know you don't want to, it's really hard to get up. I know you're all beat up and wounded and stuff like that. He says, I know, you're going through all these trials. I know. But now that you know these things, that other believers went through that as well, that Jesus Christ died on the cross just so you could be empowered to overcome, and He's pleading on your behalf, and God allows all these trials in your lives just because He's making you better. Your response should be, verse 12, so take a new grip. In the way He says, get a grip, guys, right? Take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. I love the way this is written because He understands that you have tired hands and He understands that your knees are weak right now. He understands that perfectly. And He says, but in spite of all of that, in spite of the fact that you are tired, He says, you have encouragement. So get this grip with your tired hands. All right, get a new grip. All right, just get up a little bit. Push a little harder. Strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that you who are weak and lame, so those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. Go ahead. So this is what He's saying. You're tired, I know, but just, you know what, just hold on a little stronger. Come on, fight a little harder right now. You know you can do this because the Spirit lives in you. You know you can do this. And I know you can't get up right now, but I want you to keep trying to get up. Come on, keep trying. Let's go. Come on, get up. And we're getting up and we're slowly getting up. God, why? And so you will mark out a path for the person behind you. So people will look at you and be encouraged and will do the same. Listen, chapter 11 of Heroes of Faith, it's not over yet. As long as humanity exists, it's continuing, it's being written still. So would you be that person? Would you strive to get into chapter 11 of Hebrews? Mark out a straight path so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. So it seems simple. We are urged to get up when we are tired. We are urged to strengthen our weak knees and mark out a straight path for our feet. The response is to keep fighting for as long as we live. You hear me? Keep fighting for as long as you live. For God, for His glory, and for His kingdom. So you have a crowd of witnesses who walked ahead of you, showing you that life of faith is achievable. They are cheering for us. We have Jesus that endured the cross so that you and I would get up every time we are knocked down. We have Jesus that pleads on our behalf when we fall. We have an understanding that we are going through trials because God allows it and because He is working on us at this very moment. So what are you going through? With that being said, with this question, I would like for us to close our eyes and bow our heads. What is it that you're going through? Holy Spirit, I pray that there will be a complete surrender to your guidance. As we're praying and we're thinking about things we are going through, would you enable us to hear your voice as you guide us through this process? Would you remind us that we are children of the Most High and we have His Spirit living in us and we can overcome? And for those of us that are just so weak right now and don't know what to do, struggling a lot and losing faith, losing hope, may you lift them up. In Jesus' name, lift them up. Let them know that Jesus is sitting at the right hand of God at this moment, pleading for them. They're in a good position still. Lift them up. And for those of us that are struggling so hard and we just, every day seems like a struggle and we don't have any strength and feel like lost our grip, you reminded us today that we can get up still because of you, because you live in us. We can get up and we can still clench our fists and we can still hold on to you and we can still straighten out our weak knees and we can still walk. We can do this. We can do this because you are in us. And so let us believe that. Let us believe that, Lord. Empower us to walk a life of faith. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.